Welcome to our picks for Week 8 in the Canadian Football League. Before we get into the games, we just wanted to clear the air from our podcast episode on Monday, which was recorded on Monday morning before the RCMP released any details regarding the car collision that killed Saskatchewan Roughriders captain Jayden Dalkey. We did at that time acknowledge that there was a second party who'd lost their life and offer our condolences, but the name of that individual was not public at that time, and that is why we did not name them at that time. We want to do that now and recognize Bhishma Rajaguru, 22-year-old Regina resident who also lost his life tragically on Saturday night on Highway 11 near Lumsden, Saskatchewan. We understand the Riders will be paying tribute to Bhishma Rajaguru before Thursday's game against the Edmonton Elks. And so the CFL community will have an opportunity to, whether it's in person or on television, offer a moment of silence in his memory. We, of course, offer our condolences to his family members and friends. We just wanted to, again, clear the air because we did not have Bhishma's name publicly before we recorded last podcast. And because it was posted after the announcement from the RCMP, some people thought we were choosing not to name them, and that is not at all the case. So rest in peace, Bhishma Rajaguru. JC, let's get into the picks. We got our football week starting on Thursday night, and it begins with the Edmonton Elks visiting the Saskatchewan Roughriders, where the green and white are 4.5-point favorites. The Elks sit first in the West Division standings at 5-1, though the team barely beat the BC Lions this past week, despite Nathan Rourke leaving the game on just the second play from scrimmage. This game will be an emotionally charged night as the Riders come back from bye. Do you think they can get the win, or can the Edmonton Elks improve to 6-1?
Well, I think the emotions of this week could really swing either way for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. It might uplift them and bring the team together. It may have also drained them before this matchup, but sticking with the football elements of it, I still think the Riders are the better bet in this game. I love what the Edmonton Elks have done to this point in the season. I think they're a legitimate contender out of the West Division, but they've shown some flaws, right? They have to win in a very particular way, and I think they're also going to be limited this week by injuries along the offensive line. Carter O'Donnell is just the latest starting offensive lineman to go down. He'll be replaced by Brett Boyko. Saskatchewan has a tremendous defense. I think they have a tremendous defensive line, and I think they've got defensive coaches and Corey Mace, their head coach, and of course, defensive coordinator Josh Bell, who are smart enough to figure out the blueprint that the BC Lions have used in their 2 games against Edmonton, which dealt them their first loss and kept things so close last week. I think it's going to be tougher for Justin Rankin to get going again, and I think there's going to be more pressure placed on Cody Fajardo. For that reason, I am picking the Saskatchewan Roughriders to win this game. However, I like the Elks enough that even with a relatively short spread at 4.5, I will take the Elks to cover.
I've got the same exact pick here, JC. I've got the Saskatchewan Roughriders to win, but the Edmonton Elks to cover. I have the same concern about Edmonton's offensive line. We know they rely heavily on running the football, something they've done at an extremely high level against everybody, except their 2 meetings against BC. And I do wonder if the Riders during their bye week will have had the opportunity to go, wow, the BC Lions completely took away Justin Rankin on the ground. Let's get in their bag of tricks and see if we can show similar defensive fronts, tap into some of the schemes that they were running in order to take away Justin Rankin, who's been arguably the best player in the CFL so far in 2026. The other factor for me is Roland Milligan Jr. returning. The Saskatchewan Roughriders have been solid on defense, but a little bit of a step down from last year. To me, I want to see more playmaking on the back end. Their defensive line is very good by committee, but on the back end, they have been exposed at times. I think Milligan, as one of the best playmaking defensive backs in the CFL, can potentially take advantage of some more opportunities that come his way relative to maybe some of the guys that Saskatchewan has had at boundary halfback in his place since he went down in week 2. That was a very early injury. Remember, the Riders had a bye in week 1. So Milligan has barely been on the field all year. Getting him back, a former most outstanding defensive player, a 2-time All CFL player, to me, can't be understated. But I do think this line is a little wide. I think the Elks deserve a little more credit than this. I do think the Riders should be favorite, but I don't think it should be a 4.5-point favorite. I think this should be more of a 2 or 3-point swing. So for that reason, I will take the Elks to cover.
The Calgary Stampeders will visit the Winnipeg Blue Bombers on Friday night, where the Blue and Gold are 1.5-point home favorites. The Stampeders were swept on their recent home-and-home against the Montreal Alouettes, though the team kept it tight in both games. Despite a 2-4 start to the season, Vernon Adams Jr. has thrown 17 touchdown passes and 0 interceptions amid a torrid start. The Blue Bombers got off to a terrible start last week, but were able to complete their comeback over the lowly Ottawa Redblacks and win in overtime, who will be victorious on Friday Night Football.
I'm on the Calgary Stampeders, and that's for a few reasons. One is Vernon Adams Jr. has had a lot of success coming to Winnipeg. I'll never forget week 9 in 2024. He came into Winnipeg and, struggled in that game. But week 3, just 6 weeks prior, did a fantastic job lighting up Winnipeg and getting a rare Lions win at Princess Auto Stadium. He's had success against Jordan Younger's unit previously, and we know he is off to an unbelievable start to the year. You laid it out, JC. 17 touchdowns, 0 picks. To me, he is an MOP candidate, despite the 2-4 start for the Calgary Stampeders. I think this team has underachieved badly on defense. This team has arguably the best defensive line in the league, but their defense as a unit ranks last in yards against per play and also offensive points allowed. Those are the 2 most important statistics, in my opinion, and they are 9th. Now, I do think that stat is a little bit inflated because the Stampeders have played the Montreal Alouettes back-to-back, who have been putting all kinds of yardage and all kinds of points up on every other team in the league. The Stampeders have also played the Toronto Argonauts, who are the other team that has been putting up all kinds of points on everybody. So I don't think they're as bad as the numbers indicate. And they also look to be getting Jaden Grant back at field side halfback. I think that could fix some of the issues they've been facing in their secondary. And I also think we need to talk a little bit about Stanley Bryant, who really struggled at times at left tackle for the Blue Bombers last week against Luigi Villain, former NFLer who is making his first career start. If I'm Clarence Hicks or I'm Flaren Rimolade, I'm licking my chops trying to take this Hall of Famer to the woodshed. Stanley Bryant has looked really good at times this year, but he's also 40 years old and has struggled at times. So I think the Bombers could win this game. They're obviously tough to beat at home, generally speaking. The Stampeders also rank 7th in rushing yards allowed per carry. So maybe Brady Oliveira can have a bounce back week after being very quiet against the Ottawa Redblacks in week 7. But that said, for me, especially with Winnipeg coming off a short week, only 5 days of rest, I am happy to take the Calgary Stampeders and get 1.5 points on top of that.
I'm in the exact same boat as you are, Hodge. And for me, it comes down to a team in the Calgary Stampeders whose last 2 losses against a very good Montreal Alouettes team isn't necessarily indicative of what they are or what their potential is. And another team in the Winnipeg Blue Bombers that I think really got fortunate last week. As much as they were able to be impressive late in that game and mount a comeback, they were horrific early on. And Drew Brown, for all the praise he got for defeating his former team, should have had 4 interceptions in that game. They were all dropped. I think some of those problems may continue again and give a boost to this Calgary secondary that has struggled. Jaden Grant coming back, I think, will be a help to them. Looks like Derek Moncrief may be on the shelf. We're unsure of his status at this time. That could hurt the unit, but I still think that Calgary can get it done with that pass rush and with Vernon Adams Jr. legging it up offensively. I have the Stampeders to beat the Bombers at home.
And for all the injury updates, remember to check back at 3downnation.com. We'll have them over Thursday, Friday, Saturday as these games come out. Because with the later games in the week, as we're making this picks video, we don't always have all the information. The Toronto Argonauts will visit the BC Lions on Saturday afternoon, where the Lions are 3.5-point home underdogs. The Argonauts lost in Hamilton last week, though they would have won had Liram Hajrullahu not missed a 31-yard field goal on the game's final play. And I had the Argos to win that game. I was personally not thrilled when Liram Hajrullahu missed that kick. It took a toll on my season-long record. The Lions will start Chase Bryce under center as Nathan Rourke is out with a shoulder injury, though BC got some good news this week as he's expected to miss weeks, not months. Bryce threw 4 interceptions in a relief effort last week. This will be his first career CFL start. Who you got, JC? The Boatmen or the Leos?
This is a classic matchup between a movable object and a stoppable force. Chase Bryce did not look good in that game for the BC Lions, and the Toronto Argonauts defense has been absolutely horrific thus far against the pass. That potentially opens up some opportunities for Bryce to get more comfortable here. There's also injuries along the Toronto Argonauts defensive line. It doesn't look like Andrew Chatfield is going to be available for them for the next few weeks. That will help the Lions as well. But ultimately, to me, this comes down to the other matchup, and that's between Chad Kelly and the BC Lions defense. The BC Lions defense, after struggling mightily early in the season, seems to have found its form. They had a couple of fantastic games against Edmonton, but they are much more of a run defense than they are a pass defense. I still think there's some question marks in terms of how they'll look when being challenged by a deep, explosive passing attack. That is what Chad Kelly brings to the table with the Argonauts. I think he'll be going deep often, and I expect him to have success here in BC Place and spoil the party for the Lions, who are making their return there after the FIFA World Cup, potentially previewing some future success for the Argos when they're able to make their similar return to BMO Field in a couple of weeks. I am pounding the Argos at this line. I'd take them up to a touchdown.
I'm also on the double blue this week, and it's for many of the same reasons as you, JC. The Argonauts, yes, have struggled defensively, but there's one area where they've done well. They've got 15 takeaways, that's second most in the CFL, and Chase Bryce gave the ball away 4 times this past week against Edmonton. I do think there are a couple reasons that we will see a better Chase Bryce this week. For one, he's had all the first team reps in practice and knows he's starting, right? He was forced into last week's game early on, despite Nathan Rourke being the starter and getting, of course, the Lions' share of the starting reps, if not all of them. And also, we know that Toronto's defense is not nearly at the same level as Edmonton's. That said, it's a first career start. There's going to be mistakes. And if the Argonauts can just maintain their level of offensive explosiveness, which has been very high, and you add a couple of takeaways into the mix, I like their odds of getting this done. And look, Chad Kelly talked about this when the Argonauts played a bit of a flat game 2 weeks ago in Saskatchewan, in that the Argonauts have started on the road, right? They've spent so much time out west. Well, last week they got to be in Hamilton, which, yes, was not a true home game, but they've at least had the chance to be in Southern Ontario and not on these long haul cross country flights literally every single week. So yes, Toronto to BC is a big trip, but they just got the opportunity to rest up a little bit. And the injuries along the defensive line concern me a little bit for the Argonauts, but there's also nobody on that unit who's hurt right now, who I would say was an absolute world beater to start the year. That was always a bit of a concern spot for me with the Argonauts, is that pass rush. It's been fine to start the year. Certainly not one of the league's best units. And so I'm happy to take them here against a young quarterback who, I think Chase Bryce, a 1 touchdown, 2 interception kind of night might be what we see. Now, it's the Canadian Football League. The best story would be 5 touchdowns, no picks. and anything can happen. So maybe Bryce will light it up, but that's not my expectation. That's typically not what we see in these first type of games. And so best of luck to Chase Bryce. The CFL needs more competent quarterbacks, but here I would imagine he's going to struggle at least a little bit, just like he did last week against the Edmonton Elks.
The Hamilton Tiger Cats are set to visit the Montreal Alouettes on Sunday night, where we have the widest line of the CFL season thus far, as the Owls are 10.5-point home favorites. The Tiger Cats beat Toronto by the skin of their teeth last week as Trey Ford made his first start as a member of the team and rushed for 109 yards. The Alouettes have been red hot as Davis Alexander and Tyson Philpott continue to establish themselves as legitimate MOP candidates. Can the Ticats go 2-0 with Ford at the helm? And if not, can the Alouettes cover this mile-wide spread?
This spread is wild. Like, don't get me wrong. The Alouettes are a better football team than the Tiger Cats. They already beat them head-to-head once this year, and that was when the Tabbies had Bo Levi Mitchell under center and playing at a high level. Obviously, Trey Ford is not Bo Levi Mitchell, but I thought he did some good things this past week. He put up 109 rushing yards on the Toronto Argonauts, had a touchdown and a pick, and I think that recipe can lead to success for the Tiger Cats down the stretch this season. I do think the Alouettes are going to win this one, JC. Again, I don't think that's a particularly close battle, but like 10.5 points. Like, odds makers are out here giving away points like Oprah gives away vehicles. Like, this is wild to me. And if there's one knock on the Alouettes, who are the number one team on my power rankings ballot right now, by the way, if there's one knock on them, it's that at times they've let teams get back into games. Exhibit A is last week in Calgary, where they absolutely dominated the first half. They were up 22-0 at one point and then won the game by 6 points. So if there was ever an opportunity for a good backdoor cover, it is this one. Give me the Montreal Alouettes to win, but I will take the Tabbies to cover this wild spread.
I'm in agreement once again, Hodge, because this to me is going to be a part of the Trey Ford roller coaster, right? We saw what I think was one of the best performances of his CFL career last week. I thought it was one of the best games I've ever seen called on behalf of Trey Ford by Scott Milanovich, but he's been so inconsistent that I just can't trust it fully going forward. And there's so many injuries along that offensive line. Let's not forget that they had to play tight end Maximilian Mang at right guard for much of the second half of that game, that there's going to be some concerns that trickle over into this matchup. Now, I think the Alouettes will win for those reasons, but 10.5 points is ridiculous. I'd probably take them to cover at 4.5. I'd probably take them even maybe up to a touchdown, but 10.5 is just too rich for me. A little bit too rich. So I won't eat these points here. I'll take the Ticats to cover the long spread, but the Alouettes are just too good of a football team not to pick to win straight up.
And because we didn't give our records off the top, JC, straight up, you are 21-5 on the year. I am 17-9, and we have the same record against the spread, 16-10. And I think we're going to have the same changes this upcoming week, because I'm pretty sure we made the exact same picks for week 8. So we're either both geniuses or we're both morons. And I'm sure the people in the comments will be happy to tell us which one is true. For JC Abbott, I'm John Hodge. Enjoy week 8 in the Canadian Football League.